Mic 1, check, 1, 2, 3. Mic 2, check.
Raise your right hand. Do you swear that the testimony you are about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Good morning. My name is Ted Smith, and I've introduced myself to you before.
Yes.
Would you please state your name for the record?
Rita Haymes.
And spell your last name, please.
Haymes.
Ms. Haymes, what's your current address?
665 Northeast 195 Street, North Miami Beach, Florida. 33179.
How long have you lived there?
Since 77, 28 years or more.
Did you ever, since 1977, have you resided or received your mail at any other address?
No.
Can you describe for me a little of your work history?
What I did when I worked?
Yes, what you did before.
I was always a secretary for various firms. When I moved to Florida, I became a medical transcriber in a hospital for a doctor.
And
Can I interrupt you one moment?
your grandson is Brian Marshall, also known as Zylo Marshall.
Yes.
For a period of time, Zylo came and lived with you in Florida, is that right?
Yes.
Do you remember when that was?
It was after his 18th birthday, must have been 93.
How long did he live with you in Florida?
He lived with me a few months, and then I placed him in a facility called New Lifestyles. It was a private school.
Did he ever come back and live with you again?
Just for visits.
And during that time, you saw him frequently?
Yes. Excuse me, he lived in Florida for several years.
And when was that?
In 1993, I think. I don't remember the dates, but he lived in Florida at New Lifestyles, and he lived on his own in an apartment.
After he left Florida, where did he go?
He went to Sacramento, California, I think. I don't remember the sequence. I mean, at one time he lived with an aunt on his father's side, something like that. I forget.
Your daughter is Zylo's mother?
Yes.
I want to turn to the period of time when your daughter, after your daughter had passed away. And were you involved at all in administering her estate?
I became trustee for Brian's money.
And that happened after, as you understand it, that happened after the administration of your daughter's estate and after completion of some legal work in California?
Objection leading.
Brian had a conservator in California after my daughter was passed away. From that conservatorship, I had correspondence with, his name was Earl Phoenix. I had correspondence with him to take Brian's inheritance, so to speak, and become his trustee, which I did.
What do you recall being included in Brian's inheritance?
All,
Objection calls for the guess, speculate,
shall I answer that?
hearsay.
Yes, occasionally an attorney might object, allow the attorney to complete the objection, and then go ahead and answer the question.
May I have the objection again, please?
Calls for to speculate, hearsay. Lacks foundation, calls for a legal conclusion.
Well, I know for a fact that he had money in various banks that Earl Phoenix, the conservator, was holding for him, and I acquired that money after I became trustee. And Louise Bales, fight master, I guess she was the lawyer involved, she implemented the transaction.
Did the trust include any property, as you recall?
Calls for legal conclusion, hearsay, calls for to guess and speculate.
In all the records that I have, it said that Brian has 50% interest in the property in Guerneville.
That property, do you recall the address of that property?
Well, it's here someplace. It's 15503 Old Cazadero Road, Guerneville.
Would you just describe for me what document you looked at to find that address?
Well, it's on Louise Bales, Fight Master's stationery, Exhibit B 100104 on the bottom.
Thank you. Thank you.
Did she say 9-5? Last,
Mhm.
just 5. I heard something.
100104.
She said something 5.
Ask her not to.
Ms. Haymes, would you please look at the document that's been marked Exhibit 1? And that is a November 9, 1992 letter.
Yes,
Do you recognize that letter?
yes, I wrote it.
That's your handwriting on both pages
Yes,
and your signature.
yes.
Do you recall why you wrote the letter?
Well, in the letter, it says that when he becomes 18, he's going to inherit all the trust fund, all the money from the trust fund. And I wanted to know, shall I read the letter? I mean, I don't recall what's in the letter. Shall I read it?
No, that document will speak for itself.
That's what I thought.
Yes. Do you recall what your concern was with respect to Brian receiving his money when he turned 18?
Objection, relevancy, calls for her to guess and speculate.
The fact that his father wanted to have his money and was fighting for my daughter's estate, I felt I wanted to know how the money was going to be utilized. And at that time, I had to look for an avenue to protect the money. So I hired a lawyer to put it into an irrevocable trust, which he did. His name is Jerry Cohn, the lawyer for my grandson, and he set up a trust fund. And so the money could not be touched by his father or the government because he's disabled. Brian is disabled.
Objection to the extent that it lacks foundation and is non-responsive.
So What was, you mentioned that Brian's father was after some money in your daughter's estate.
Yes.
Explain that to me. Explain what your understanding was back at the time in what year are we talking about?
Well, in 92, Brian would have been 18. In May of 92, he would have been 18. And
So you indicated that his father had, that you were concerned that his father had made some claim in your daughter's estate. Can you
Yes.
describe what you understood back? Can you describe what you understood back then about that?
there's a letter from Jerry Cohn that states, Brian's father appeared at the hearing to object to the trust. The trust was approved by the court. As a matter of procedure, Brian's father was given an opportunity to file written objections. The hearing was scheduled for November 1st, 94, for the purpose of hearing his objections. Whether he actually files the objections or not, we are not sure, but I understand he has a habit of showing up at all the meetings. This is Brian's father. He did state to the court that Brian said he was unhappy in Florida, that Brian wanted to come home. But this is not true. Brian wanted to remain in Florida.
So, and you're,
Hang on, I'm going to object, move to strike, non-responsive, lacks foundation, hearsay.
so you're looking at a document marked Exhibit 2,
Yes,
and it's an October 5, 1994 letter.
yes,
Do you recall receiving that letter around October 5, 1994?
yes,
And you read the letter when you received it?
yes.
And that letter, as you have just read, reflects what your understanding was about Alan Marshall's objections to the trust.
Objection, leading, hearsay, lacks foundation.
Could you ask me that again?
Sure. That letter, the reason you just read that letter to us is because it reflects what your understanding was back in October 1994 regarding Alan Marshall's objections to the trust.
Objection, leading, lacks foundation, hearsay.
He objected to the trust as far as this letter is concerned. He was objecting to the fact that he wanted Brian's money. He
What
wanted
did
to
you
control
understand?
Brian's money.
Mhm. What did you understand Alan Marshall's claim was to the trust back in 1994?
Objection, hearsay, lacks foundation.
I don't know what his reasons were, except that he didn't want my grandson. He didn't want my grandson to have control of his inheritance that he was going to get from his mother. His mother had money from an accident that she sustained and life insurance, which was for Brian. That money he wanted, Alan Marshall wanted.
Speculation, hearsay, lacks foundation. Move to strike the portion of the answer that's non-responsive.
We just lost when we asked him to raise the volume. She's got the mic covered with paper.
I mean, as you know, there's no volume control for the microphone.
So it needs to appear on the record too.
Okay.
Ms. Haymes, would you take a look at the Exhibit 1 again for me? That's the November 9, 1992 letter.
Yes,
Does that appear to be a true and correct copy of the letter that you wrote back in November 9, 1992?
yes,
Did you keep a copy of that letter?
yes,
And did you maintain a copy of that letter as part of your duties as trustee?
yes.
Objection, one leading.
And would you look at the Exhibit 2 there for me, please? That's the next letter.
Exhibit 2, From Jerry Cohn? From Jerry Cohn? Yes,
That's the Jerry Cohn letter.
right.
And does that appear to you to be a true and correct copy of the letter that you received back in October 1994?
Yes,
Keep a copy of that letter as part of your duties as trustee.
yes.
The next exhibit is Exhibit 3. What is this document?
October 5th, 1994. To the,
Correct.
to the judge, Louise Vales, fight master. It's regarding his trust fund. You want me to read it?
No, did Jerry Cohn ask you to write a letter to the court?
Yes,
Did you write a letter to the court?
yes, this is the letter.
All right. Does this letter reflect your understanding, what does this letter reflect in connection with the what does this letter reflect in connection with the trust and the objections to the trust made by Alan Marshall?
I believe that Alan Marshall wants Brian to give up half interest in the house that Alan Marshall lives in, and that Brian does not wish to give up his half interest because it belonged to his mother.
How did you come to that belief?
I knew it for a fact. My daughter told me.
Did you have any other source for that belief?
No.
Does Exhibit 3, now this is does this appear to be a true and correct copy of the letter that you wrote back in October 1994?
Yes, that's my handwriting, and I wrote it.
And did you maintain a copy of this letter as part of your duties as trustee?
Yes,
Were the contents of this letter accurate at the time you wrote it?
absolutely.
You look at Exhibit 4 for me, Ms. Haymes.
Yes.
Have you seen these? This is a series of documents. Have you seen these documents before today?
No, I have not.
All right. Would you look at Exhibit 5, please?
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen this document before today?
I don't remember. If it was written to me, I must have received it.
You don't. Do you recall any communications with Mr. Phoenix regarding taxes?
I really don't remember.
Okay. I'm sorry, do you remember what date you began to be the trustee for Brian's trust?
Well, it was in around 1994. I contacted Jerry Cohn, and we were working on it at that time.
All right, and do you recall at any point having communications with the anyone in the county of Sonoma at the tax collector's office regarding the property at 15503?
I had received notice that it was going to go into foreclosure if the taxes weren't paid, and they wanted me to pay them. But since I didn't have any allegiance to the property, I refused to pay the taxes. It was his father's duty to pay them. He lived in the house. He should have paid them. And they wanted me to pay it because my name was on the deed.
Did you have an understanding of why your name was on the deed?
Because I was his trustee.
Did you try and communicate with anyone regarding regarding your belief that Alan Marshall should have to pay the taxes since he lived there?
I don't understand that question.
Okay. Did you ever contact Alan Marshall or try to contact Alan Marshall to explain that he needed to pay the taxes?
Yes, at one point I sent a letter to him, a registered letter with the tax receipts, asking him to pay the taxes. I wrote him a letter in 1995.
Now, did you say with the tax receipts?
Wait a minute. Well, there was a tax bill here with Earl Phoenix's name on it. Tax statement with Earl's tax statement, and then in any event, I wrote to Alan Marshall in 95, telling him that I was advised by Sonoma County that the person dwelling in the home would be the one to apply for homestead exemption. This will lower his taxes by $70 annually. In addition, since he lives in the house, it's his responsibility to pay the taxes. Brian should not have to pay it. If the taxes are not paid, the house will go into foreclosure. I hope you do not intend for this to happen. The first installment is $248, was paid by Earl Phoenix out of Brian's money. The second installment is due before April 10th, 95 for the same amount, and I do not intend to pay this tax bill for you. Please act accordingly. Well, he never accepted the letter, and it came back to me, and I sent it on to you.
Objection to the portion that's non-responsive, hearsay, speculation.
This letter that you're looking at, is this the one marked Exhibit 6?
Yes.
Exhibit 6 includes what's that first sheet there?
The first sheet is that's the tax statement showing it was paid in 94.
All right. Now, in front of that is a return receipt.
Yes.
Report.
A return, yes.
And before
Return
that
receipt.
looks like a copy of an envelope. Do you see that?
That's right. This envelope came back to me, unclaimed.
And it looks like, on my copy at least, it looks like there's a little note in the upper left-hand corner. Is that a note that you wrote?
Yes, this is the original letter and proof that it was returned to me.
You wrote that after you got this letter back?
Yes,
All right. So do all these pages Exhibit 6, does this represent a true and correct copy of the envelope, the return receipts, enclosures, and letters that you sent to Alan Marshall on or about January 19th, 1995?
Yes.
And did you keep, once this came back to you, did you keep the original?
Yes.
And did you keep it as part of your duties as a trustee?
Yes.
Did you have any discussion with Mr. Marshall regarding this tax issue?
No. Never spoke to him.
Did you ever speak to Mr. Marshall regarding this property at 15503 since your daughter's death?
No.
Do you know who Melanie Cook is?
It's my understanding that she was his girlfriend.
Did you ever speak to Melanie Cook regarding 15503
No.
Old Capitol Road?
Never.
Did you ever receive any letters from Alan Marshall that you recall regarding the property at 15503?
No.
Did you ever receive any letters from Melanie Cook, or maybe she was calling herself Melanie Marshall, regarding the property at 15503?
No.
You mark that. Do you know, do you recall what happened following the, well, let me back up. You understood back in 1994, late 1994, that Alan Marshall was making objections to the trust.
Yes.
Do you recall what happened with respect to the trust and those objections?
Objection vague, overbroad, calls for to speculate, and form a legal conclusion.
I really don't remember.
Do you remember if the trust got confirmed or not?
Same objections.
The trust was confirmed. It was an irrevocable trust.
Right. And was there any property included in it?
Objection calls for to speculate, legal conclusion.
50% of the property goes to Brian Marshall.
Did you receive any documents reflecting that?
Many. Yes.
Take a look with me at Exhibit 7, please.
Yes.
What is this document?
Objection, the document will speak for itself, calls for to guess and speculate, hearsay.
This deed is on Brian's 50% of the property in Guerneville.
Who did you receive it from?
Just a second. Objection, move to strike. She explained she just read the letter. The document will speak for itself.
Who did you receive it from?
Rosemary Holtz, legal assistant to Louise Bales, fight master.
When you received it, did you keep a copy?
Yes.
Does Exhibit 7 reflect a true and correct copy of what you received back in January 1995 or February 1995?
Objection calls for to guess and speculate unless she has the original document there. The document will speak for itself.
Yes.
And did you maintain this copy in your ordinary duties as trustee?
Yes.
Ms. Haymes, following this correspondence and grant deed from Louise Bales Fight Master in January 1995, when did you next have communications regarding this property in Guerneville?
I don't remember.
want you to look at a document that's been marked Exhibit 10. We're going to skip over 8 and 9.
Ten. Yes.
What is this document?
Well, this pertains to a letter I received from from Alan Marshall's neighbor, Brian Larson, complaining that there was drug trafficking in the house, that there was a trailer on the property and a lot of debris, and it was an eyesore, and that he was going to fine me $5,000 if I did not comply and get rid of the unagreeable tenant in the home.
When did you write this letter?
Objection, move to strike the person that's non-responsive.
When did you write it?
Could you slow down and not record me? Non-responsive and hearsay.
When did you write this letter?
In August 6, 97.
This is all your handwriting?
Yes, it is.
Did you keep a copy of this letter?
Yes, I did.
Is this a true and correct copy of the letter that you wrote back on August 6, 1997?
Yes.
So this Exhibit 10, is this a copy of what you kept in your files after you wrote it?
Yes.
And did you keep that copy in your normal course of duties as trustee?
Yes.
Was it accurate when you wrote it?
Yes.
You mentioned that this was in response to a letter you received from Alan Marshall's neighbor. Can you take a look at Exhibit 15 for me?
Yes.
What is this?
This is a letter from Brian Larson at 15381 Old Cazadero Road, his neighbor.
So Exhibit 15 is the letter you were talking about in Exhibit 10?
Yes.
And does Exhibit 15 appear to you to be a true and correct copy of the letter that you received?
Yes.
Did you keep a copy of that letter in your normal duties as trustee?
Yes.
Between the time that you received Exhibit 15 and the earlier time when you got the deed to the property in Exhibit 7, do you remember having any communications with anyone regarding the property at 15503 Old Cazadero Road?
I did speak with Brian Larson, who showed an interest in purchasing the property, possibly, but that he wouldn't be able to do so because of all the drug trafficking.
Anyone else?
No.
When you sent Exhibit 10, your letter to Ms. Fightmaster in August 1997, what did you want her to do?
I wanted her to evict Melanie from the home. As it says in the letter that I wrote, that I was going to be I was going to have a lawsuit against me for $5,000.
What was your concern? What prompted you to write the letter?
I wanted her to evict Melanie from the home
But why?
because she was drug trafficking and trashing the house.
Objection calls for speculation, hearsay, lacks foundation.
Excuse me. Excuse me, I keep my phone on in case my children's school calls. any other concern or reason for wanting to have Melanie evicted from the house?
Well, Brian wanted to sell the house. He wanted to have it sold and have her out of the house because of the way she was conducting herself. He was quite upset about that.
Anything else? Is that all just the way she was conducting herself? Anything else?
Not that I remember.
Okay. Will you look at me? I'm sorry. Did you get a response from Ms. Fikemaster to your August 1997 letter?
If it's not in my papers, then I didn't. I don't know whether I did or not. I'd have to have the papers. I don't remember.
Look with me at Exhibit 11, please.
Okay.
It should say, okay. You have it.
Well, this is from an attorney in Santa Rosa.
Right. What's the date on that letter?
September 5th, 97. It was
Do you
sent.
remember receiving this letter back in September 1997?
Yes. It was sent to me and Alan Haymes and Brian.
At this point in time, were you still trustee?
Yes. I think so. Well, at one point in time, I relinquished my trusteeship to Alan Haymes, who was his grandfather.
As you sit here today, do you remember precisely when that was?
It must have been around 97, February 97, in that time frame.
Now, this letter, marked as Exhibit 11, appears to have an enclosure, and I want you to take a look at Exhibit 12 for me.
Yes.
All right. And my question for you is, Exhibit 11 and Exhibit 12 combined, is this a true and correct copy of what you received back in September 1997?
Yes.
Did you maintain a copy of this in your files as a trustee?
Yes.
At this point in September 1997, do you recall if you were actively involved in making decisions regarding the trust and its assets?
It was an irrevocable trust set up for him that I implemented.
Yeah. What I'm getting at is, I guess, it sounds like you weren't trustee back in September 1997.
If I weren't, then
Statement
Alan
of
Haymes,
testimony.
Alan Haymes was.
Wait a minute, Mel, I'm sorry. I need.
Excuse me?
Objection leading of the state's prior testimony.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. You had spoken when the attorney was giving his objection.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you, go ahead.
But you ask me again, please?
Sure. I gather you weren't trustee back in September 1997.
I don't remember the exact date, but at one point in time, the trusteeship went to Alan Haymes, but I don't remember the date.
When the trusteeship went to Alan Haymes, what did you understand to be your duties with respect to the trust at that point?
I turned everything over to Alan Haymes.
And at that point, did you feel like you had given over responsibility for the trust and its assets to him?
Yes.
And that would include the property at Old Cazadero Road?
Yes.
Right. So you look at Exhibit 13 for me, please.
Okay.
And what is this document?
It's to TD Service telling that I'm no longer the trustee for Zylo Marshall, Brian, 98. This was 98. And that
This is a letter that you wrote?
I wrote. Yes.
Yeah, and all of the writing on here is your handwriting?
Yes.
You wrote it on May 1st, 1998?
Yes.
And it was accurate at the time you wrote it?
Yes.
Did you keep a copy of the letter?
Yes.
And does this, Exhibit 13, is this a true and correct copy of the letter that you wrote back in May 1998?
Yes.
And you kept a copy as part of your trustee file?
Yes.
Is this, what prompted this letter, Exhibit 13, do you recall?
It seems that there was a debt on the property, and they wanted me to pay either the taxes or the mortgage because my name was on the deed. But no longer being the trustee, my name was not removed from the deed at the time that Alan Haymes became the trustee. So I was still getting correspondence about the property. And then I objected because I didn't feel that it was my responsibility to pay the debt. Whatever the debt was, I don't remember.
Did you have an opinion or belief back in May 1998 as to what should happen to any proceeds if the house should be sold in foreclosure?
If the house...
Could you reread the question? Hang on.
Did you have an opinion or belief back in May 1998 as to what should happen to the proceeds if the house should be sold or go into foreclosure?
Objection, relevancy, calls for legal conclusion, hearsay, lacks foundation.
I felt that if the house were to be sold, the proceeds should go to Brian Marshall.
To Exhibit 16, please.
Yes.
What is this?
It's a letter to whom it may concern. April 8th, 2005. I'm Zylo's maternal grandfather, and to the best of my knowledge, my daughter Denise contributed over $10,000 toward the purchase of a single-family home in Guerneville in 1977. Yes, I wrote this.
When did you write it?
April 8th, 2005.
Does Exhibit 16 reflect a true and correct copy of what you wrote?
Yes.
Why did you write it?
I believe Brian asked me to write it, or the lawyer asked me to write it. I don't remember, but I wrote it because that was my true belief. I mean, I knew that that's what she had done.
How did you know that?
She told me.
When did your daughter tell you that she contributed over $10,000 towards the purchase of a home in Guerneville in 1977?
When all the problems were going on between his wanting her, she wanted custody of Brian. There was controversy over the house, and she said half the house belongs to her. She contributed $10,000 toward it, and about that time, before her demise.
Exhibit 16, was it accurate at the time you wrote it?
Yes.
Motion calls for, has to speculate, lacks foundation, hearsay.
And did you keep a copy of Exhibit 16?
Yes.
You have some other documents there with you. They start with Exhibit A. It's a big stack of documents.
This one?
I believe so, yes.
No, that's B.
Okay, well, I want you to look at Exhibit, in that big stack of documents. And while I'm looking for this exhibit, who was Jerry Cohn?
A lawyer that I hired in Brian's behalf.
What did you hire him to do?
To draw up an irrevocable trust to protect Brian's money from his father and the government.
And Mr. Cohn did that for you?
Yes, he did.
Where's Mr. Cohn located?
In Tamarack, Florida.
Was that where he was when you asked him to draw up the trust?
Yes, it's a Fort Lauderdale area.
Mm-hmm. And where was Brian living at the time? Do you recall?
He was living in an apartment.
What state?
Hollywood, Florida.
What state?
Oh, Florida, sorry.
And Mr. Cohn provided you with the trust document there in Florida?
Yes.
Now I want you to turn in that big stack of exhibits to one that's marked Exhibit O. It's about 2/3 of the way through.
You're getting there. I don't have an O. Oh, got it. Yes.
Exhibit O consists of 2 pages, and in the lower right corner it says 200,686 and 200,687. Are we looking at the same document?
Yes.
Have you ever seen this before today?
No.
Did you ever receive this letter that purports to be from Melanie Koch to you?
Never. No.
Ma'am, thank you. That's all I have on those exhibits. You love your grandson?
Absolutely.
But Would your love for your grandson cause you to make any lies or misstatements or mischaracterizations for him under oath today?
No.
Thank you, that's all I have.
You're welcome.
Good morning, Ms. Haymes. You've looked at a number of documents that they marked or identified Exhibit 1 through 16. You didn't bring those documents from your files. Those were sent to you by the attorney that was just asking you questions, correct?
I sent all the papers that I had to Ted Smith. Everything that I had, I sent to Ted Smith, and these are the papers.
The originals?
Yes.
So they have the originals.
Yes.
Have you looked at the originals in the last 6 months?
I looked at them when I received them.
When did you receive the originals?
Oh, I don't know if these were the originals. These are the copies.
Okay, that's what I'm trying to figure out is where the original file is.
The originals I sent to Ted Smith.
When?
When all this started.
Okay, more than 6 months ago.
I imagine so, yes.
And were you subpoenaed to appear? It appears you're in some attorney's office. Is that correct?
Jerry Cohn is the attorney.
It's his office.
Yes.
And is Mr. Cohen there with you?
Yes.
No, he's not.
And
There's not.
Here?
yes.
In this office at this present time? There is nobody here with me.
Did you get subpoenaed to appear or just show up voluntarily?
I received a letter from Ted Smith asking me to appear at a deposition.
Yeah. But they didn't serve you, a process server didn't come and
No.
serve you to appear. You don't really care for Alan Marshall, do you?
Not particularly.
You never have you?
No.
In fact, it'd probably be accurate to say you dislike him very much.
That's correct.
And you were a trustee from when, 1994 to sometime in 1997.
Yes.
And during that time that you were trustee, did you ever pay any property taxes for property in Sonoma County?
No.
And in fact, in 1997, you wrote to Louise Bale Fightmaster asking that she do something to evict and get rid of whoever was living in the property at 15503 Old Cazadero Highway, didn't you?
Yes.
Because you knew if you asked the people that were living there to leave, they wouldn't do it just because you asked them to.
That's correct.
And that's the way it'd been pretty much the whole time you were involved, that they would do what they wanted with the property, and they wouldn't listen to you, wouldn't move out or anything, wouldn't sell the property or do anything you wanted with regards to the property, correct?
I'm going to object, not only is it compound, but it assumes facts, not in evidence, mischaracterizes the evidence.
Go ahead, please.
Repeat the question.
They wouldn't respond or do anything that you asked them to do with regards to the property.
Again,
I never asked
assumes
them.
fact-
It was only through Brian Lawson. I had
You
no
asked Louise-
contact with them. I never spoke
asked
with
Louise-
Melanie. Sorry.
I never talked to Melanie.
Never.
Yeah, I never spoke to Melanie.
You spoke to Brian, though, correct?
I've always spoken to Brian.
And Brian told you that the father had told him, Alan Marshall had told Brian that the house was his and not Brian's?
I don't remember him telling me that.
Do you remember discussions to that effect that Brian said he had been told by his father that the house was his, meaning his father's and not Brian's?
I don't know.
And-
I'm just going to object to that line of questions vague and ambiguous, because you're talking about Brian, and you've been talking about Brian Larson, and now you may or may not be talking about Brian Marshall. I'm not sure, and I'm not sure the witness is sure.
Who are you referring to when you, Brian Marshall?
Yes.
But you knew that if you asked the people that were living in 15503 Old Cazadero Highway in the 1997 timeframe, they wouldn't do what you asked them to do, would they?
Calls for speculation, lacks foundation.
They wouldn't do it if I was to contact them, which I didn't.
And you wanted to evict them in 1997,
Yes.
but you didn't take any action in 1997, did you?
No.
And in the time period between you ever being involved in this, which continued up till 1997, did you pay any of the mortgage payments?
No.
And when the taxes came due, you said that wasn't your responsibility, that was Alan Marshall's responsibility.
Yes.
Now, even before your daughter passed away, your daughter had told you that Alan Marshall said that house was his, 15503 was his house and not her house, correct?
No.
Okay. I believe you testified earlier that in 1994, your daughter had told you that Mr. Marshall claimed the house was his.
Is that a question?
Yes?
I don't.
You're asking what you previously testified?
I don't recall that.
You don't? Do you recall your daughter telling you there was a dispute over the house before she passed away?
No, I don't remember that.
You have no recollection of that at all?
None directly, other than what I've read in these papers.
You have read about disputes between your daughter and Alan Marshall over ownership of the house.
No.
Your daughter never told you that there was a lawsuit that was filed before she passed away over the ownership of the house?
No.
Have you learned of that since?
Through the papers.
So during your time as trustee, you did become aware through the paperwork that was being sent back and forth that even before your daughter passed away, there was dispute, and Alan Marshall was claiming that the house was his.
I didn't know of the dispute.
You learned about it, though, while you were trustee, didn't you?
No.
Okay. Go to what they gave you was a letter that, or a to whom it may concern letter dated April 8, 2005.
Where would
That's,
that be?
Exhibit 16.
16. I'm on Exhibit O. Where's 16?
It was the ones you were looking at originally, the first set. It's the very last exhibit, last page.
Yes.
Now, you wrote that because the attorneys or Brian Marshall asked you to write that, correct?
Yes.
Because you had learned that they were trying to figure out where the money came to buy 15503 Old Cazadero Highway.
Yes.
Because when you were trustee, you had learned that there was a dispute over who owned the property, hadn't you?
Yes.
Going to that same stack of exhibits, Exhibits 3, that's an October 5, 1994 letter that you wrote to a judge in Sonoma County. Is that accurate?
Yes.
And at that time, Brian was reporting back to you things that his father said about the house?
Things that Brian said about him wanting to give up his half interest. Brian did not want to give up his half interest.
And Alan Marshall was saying he wanted the entire house, wasn't he?
Objection.
That's what the information you were getting through Brian.
The information was that Brian doesn't want to give up half interest in his house.
That's what Brian told you.
Yes.
Is that accurate? But you learned from Brian his father wanted the whole house, the entire house, correct? I'm asking for your recollection as you sit here today.
Say that again?
I need to know what your recollection is as you sit here today, not what the letter says, but your recollection as you sit here today.
I really don't remember whether it was that Brian wanted, that his father wanted the whole house. All I know is that Brian's half interest was in jeopardy.
Back in 1994.
Yes.
Go to the first exhibit. It's a November 9, 1992 letter.
Yes.
Now, you testified earlier that this was a letter that you did in the course and scope of your duties as trustee.
Yes.
Now, that wouldn't be accurate, would it? Because in 1992, you weren't trustee, were you?
No, he wasn't yet 18.
So that letter wasn't done with relationship to you being trustee, would it?
No. Louise Bales, my fight master, and Earl Phoenix was the conservator at that time.
And you said that the trust was confirmed. The trust is a private document that you had Mr. Cohen draft up, correct?
Yes.
And it never went to court to be confirmed, did it?
Yes, it did.
In Florida.
Yes.
You have paperwork in your file showing that there was a confirmation of that trust in Florida?
Well, there was a trust agreement that I had sent to the lawyer. It's not here. I have it at home.
The trust agreement's in the other stack of papers, if you look about 2/3 of the way down.
Which stack?
The second stack, Exhibit M. And my question is, did you ever appear in court in Florida to ask the judge to review that agreement?
I personally never went to any court in Florida. It was all done in Jerry Cohen's office.
And you didn't have to appear in court or file anything in court to set up that trust, did you?
Jerry Cohen set it up in court, through the courts. He worked with Louise Bales, fight master. He worked with her and Earl Phoenix. I did not personally go to court. I was only in Jerry Cohen's law office.
And anything other than being in Jerry Cohen's law office would be something somebody told you happened.
Told me what?
That the trust appeared in court.
Jerry Cohen assured me that this trust went through the courts. It was documented legally. Yeah, that's it.
And that's where you got your information, was what someone else told you.
Jerry Cohen was the lawyer, and he told me that it's in the court. It's documented in the trust agreement, wherever that is.
Why did you resign as trustee?
Well, Brian became, wanted to spend more of his money that I felt was unnecessary, and I was trying to protect his money. And it was hard for me to handle him because he was quite insistent on what he wanted to do with his money. And so Alan Haymes agreed to be the trustee at the time.
And then after Alan Haymes, who was the trustee?
Jerry Cohen.
When was Mr. Cohen trustee?
I don't recall the date.
So you and Brian started to see differently as to what should be done with the trust money, correct?
We didn't see differently. I was trying to protect his interest in the money. I didn't want him to spend all that money.
And he wanted to spend it.
He wanted various things, and he was spending it, and I didn't want to have him spend it. He needed a budget.
And that became a source of contention between you and Brian, is how to spend the money.
More or less.
And then did you do anything formal to transfer the trust from yourself to your husband, or I guess it'd be your ex-husband. Alan Haymes is your ex-husband.
Yes,
During the time any of this was going on, starting 91, 92, you were already separated and living apart from Alan.
yes.
And did you ever talk with Alan about what was going on?
We corresponded, and he agreed to be the trustee. He agreed to take it over.
And did you do anything formal to accomplish that?
We went through Jerry Cohn. Alan Haymes got in touch with Jerry Cohn and set up a new trusteeship. That's the
Alan
way.
Marshall. And how long was Alan Marshall trustee?
Alan Marshall was never trustee. Alan Haymes,
Excuse me. How long was Alan Haymes, your ex-husband, trustee?
several years. I don't remember how long.
And then did you discuss either with Brian or Alan Haymes why Alan Haymes resigned as trustee?
No,
That you're aware of, has Brian Marshall himself ever paid any of the taxes on 15503 Old Cazadero Highway from 1992 to the present?
my recollection is that Earl Phoenix paid some of the mortgage fees out of Brian's money. When Earl Phoenix was conservator, he paid some of the mortgage payments and taxes for Brian.
That would be secondhand knowledge, correct? You don't know that personally.
I know it from correspondence from Earl Phoenix.
That you're aware of, did Brian Marshall himself ever pay any of the taxes on the property?
I believe he did. He told me he did.
When?
During that time frame. I don't remember the
What
dates.
time frame?
I don't remember.
And what did Brian Marshall say about paying taxes?
He said he couldn't pay the taxes. He didn't want to pay it out of his money, that his father should pay it.
For the record, the video's been cut off.
Can you still hear us, though?
When the link was cut off, that Brian did not want to pay the taxes or the mortgage. Can you finish your response for us?
As far as I remember, I don't think he paid the mortgage. I don't know whether he intentionally didn't do it or whether he couldn't get the money from the trustee at the time. If it was the time frame that Alan Haymes was his trustee.
To your knowledge, you are unaware of Brian Marshall at any time paying any of the mortgage payments or any of the tax payments on the property. Is that accurate, of your knowledge?
To my knowledge, I don't really know.
Okay. And during the time that you were trustee, you as trustee never paid any of the tax payments nor any of the mortgage payments, did you?
No.
Looking at the large stack of documents, starting with Exhibit A, the top one, it is a form that at the top says affidavit hyphen death of joint tenant.
Affidavit B I got. I don't know where that is.
Down at the bottom, it should say Exhibit A, document 100001. It is a county form type document, has a county seal up at the top.
Maybe I mixed it up. What were the numbers again?
In the middle, bottom, it says Exhibit A. On the bottom right corner, 100,001.
These are all 200s. 100,104. It's Exhibit B. I
There
don't,
should be a document that goes on top of that. I see some over here to your left up in front. Are those?
these?
Yes, are those, is it in there?
This is, one oh oh 104. It's still Exhibit B. I don't have it. I don't see it. I'm sorry.
Were you aware that in September of 1990, shortly after your daughter passed away, that Alan Marshall filed an affidavit of death of joint tenant, which claims he's the sole owner of the property?
No.
You did mention during the time the property was in foreclosure that you had no allegiance to the property. What did you mean by that?
It means that I didn't own it just because my name was on the deed. I had no connection to it other
And
than,
had no obligation to pay?
Wait, can you allow the witness to answer the question and complete her answer?
I believe she had.
I had no,
This may be the 12th time you've cut her off.
That's
Please
inaccurate.
complete your answer, ma'am.
I did not own
If
the,
we had anything more to say,
You've interrupted her again.
I did not own the property, therefore I felt no obligation to pay any taxes or mortgage, since my name was only on the deed because I was the trustee.
looking at Exhibit B, you mentioned you did have Exhibit B.
Yeah,
That is a March 2nd, 1993 letter from Louise Vale Fightmaster
yes,
to Alan Marshall.
yes.
Prior to today's deposition, have you seen that letter?
No,
Look at the second paragraph, which says, Brian expresses a sincere desire to give up any interest in the Casadero properties. See that?
yes, I see it.
Do you have a recollection that in or about March of 1993, there were discussions to that effect about quitclaiming over any potential interest to Alan Marshall?
No, I did not. He wasn't 18 at the time.
The next would be Exhibit C.
Exhibit C.
It's a set of documents that are kind of very dark colored.
Well, this is dark.
Yes, that's it.
Yes,
Do you see, it's 100134.
yes.
Do you know what that document is?
No,
Did you ever see it before?
no,
Were you aware that in 1986, the Sonoma County Superior Court entered an order against your daughter that she had to return the child to Sonoma County?
yes, she took her son to Florida.
She left California and took her son to Florida,
Yes,
correct?
yes,
And you became aware that an order was entered in California that she had to return with her son to California, or at least return her son to California.
yes.
How long was she in Florida?
Not long, maybe a year or so, I don't remember.
Did she live with you?
No,
If you'll turn through those dark colored pages, you'll come to Exhibit D.
this is Exhibit B. You say B?
D.
D?
D.
There's no
Yes.
D, there's a B, and then there's no more dark pages.
Well, yeah, after the dark pages, there should be a blank page, and then the next one would be an August 19, 1993 document up on the top.
100185?
Correct.
Yes,
Now, during the time that the guardianship and conservatorship were going on for Brian Marshall, were you receiving court documents that were being sent to you by Louise Bale Fightmaster?
yes,
And does this appear to be the type of documents that you had received from her?
yes,
In fact, this a copy of one of the documents you provided to the attorneys, Ted Smith, back when all this got started.
I don't remember if I sent this to him or not. I sent him whatever I had.
Looking at the fourth page of that exhibit,
Say again?
look at the fourth page of that exhibit.
Yes,
Up near the top, it talks about, there's a paragraph F,
yes,
a 50% interest in 14403 Old Cazadero Highway.
right.
You know what property that's referring to?
The house that's
Objective,
in
calls for
question.
speculation, lacks foundation.
Now, previously,
I'm sorry, did you get her answer?
previously you testified that the house was 15503 Old Cazadero Highway. Do you recall that?
I only told you what was on the thing. I don't remember the address.
So when you testified earlier that you believed the estate owned an interest in 15503 Old Cazadero Highway, that's not something you know, that was something you just saw on a piece of paper.
That's correct.
If you go to Exhibit E, just continue to go through the documents, you'll see a blank page and then Exhibit E.
Yes,
That starts with page 100,202
yes,
and goes through 206.
yes,
And on page 206, it has your name and an address. Was that your address back in November of 1994?
yes,
Do you recall receiving this
Yes,
document?
yes.
If you look at page 100,204,
Yeah,
E there talks about real property located at 15505 Willow Road. Do you know what property that's referring to?
15, one of the addresses is the house, and the 1400, I don't know. Maybe it's a typographical error, or that there was another property that he owned. I think there were
You don't know.
two properties that were owned at that
You don't
time.
know, you don't know what the properties were, the addresses were?
I don't remember the addresses. But if one is different than the other, then there are two properties. Real property is 15505 Willow Road. Would that be the house?
I'm asking you whether you know whether or not that's the house or not.
I believe that's the house.
If you go through the documents again, you'll see a blank page and then Exhibit F.
Yes,
Okay. And that again is some pages that are kind of poor copies.
yes,
Okay. If you go to, and it's to page 100,214,
yes,
if you look at page 100,216, you will see a signature at the bottom. Does that appear to be your daughter's signature?
yes,
And if you go to page 100,218,
yes,
down on the bottom right-hand corner, you're familiar with your daughter's signature,
yes,
and that appears to be your daughter's signature there.
yes.
And looking at page 217, 218, 219, 100,220. Those all appear to be a loan application, and your daughter's signature appears on page 100,218.
I'm going to object, it's kind of, and also calls for speculation, class foundation.
You want me to answer?
Please.
Yes, that's her signature.
And pages 217, 100,217 through 100,220 appear to be a loan application.
As far as I can see, it's hard to read.
Okay, up on page 100,217, can you read what property address it applies to?
This one is 15503, I don't know, Willow Lane?
Guerneville, Sonoma, California.
Yes,
And then down, a couple lines down, it says title will be held in names L. Allen Marshall and Denise Haymes.
yes.
You see that?
Co-borrower, yes. 15503 Willow Lane, okay.
See where on the side where it says subject property?
Yes,
See Alan Marshall and Denise Haymes? See their names typed in there?
yes.
And then to the right of that, what does it say?
Borrower and co-borrower? Is that what you
No,
mean?
just above that, right
Above,
next to,
The document speaks for itself. This is a little bit of a waste of time.
I need a
Particularly
magnifying
since it's
glass. I
anything to
can't
do.
read it.
Yeah, I agree with you.
okay, can you look up, see where it says equity? It's up in the first box.
Where on the page?
See where it says borrower and co-borrower in black?
Yeah,
The
okay.
black bar going across there?
All right. Yes,
Okay, just go up above that a little bit, and on the left-hand side, you'll see L. Allen Marshall and Denise Haymes.
yes.
And what does it say right to the right of that?
Her age?
It says joint tenants. You've got to go up just a little bit higher. You're down about an inch low.
Joint tenants. Okay.
And that's on page 100,217.
Yes,
And then a true and correct copy of your daughter's signature appears on 100,218, correct?
yes, yes.
Give you support recorder after mark that entire set as Exhibit F, attach it to your transcript. I'm going to go, now flip through those until you come to a blank page. And then you'll come to 100,224.
Yes.
I'm going to have the core recorder here marked as Exhibit G. Can you look at that document? And there's a signature above a typewriter named Denise Haymes.
Yes.
Do you recognize that signature?
It doesn't look like her other signatures.
Do you recognize